Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Friday. Thank you for joining today for our CAD Student Support Development Series, Part 2. Today is working with students with autism spectrum disorders, and I'm very excited to welcome our guest presenter, Natalie Boyce-Pardee. Natalie is a spectrum support program coach, and she is going to be sharing a little bit about the program and also about the students that she works with and that we all work with in the College of Art and Design. I'm Sharon Kampala-Porter, Assistant Dean in CAD Student Services, and very happy to be able to pull this series together for all of you. Without further ado, I want to turn it over to Natalie.
Thanks, Sharon. Hi, everyone. As Sharon said, my name is Natalie Boyce-Pardee, and I have been with the Spectrum Support Program quite a while. I was with them for a while part-time, and I've been with them full-time for about 5 years. And I've been at RIT about 16 years total in various areas of student support services. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about how to best support our students, some things that it's helpful to know, and also just how we can help you best support our students and how you can partner with us as well. So I have a PowerPoint, so just give me a second. Always takes me just a minute to do the presenter. Okay. Now, slideshow beginning. Okay. So let me ask, Sharon, can you tell me, can you see just the presenter view right now?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. It always takes me, I don't do it often enough to know it off the top of my head. So anyway, hello, I already introduced myself. So I want to talk a little bit about our mission of the Spectrum Support Program. What we strive to do is to provide support, innovative support that positively impacts the college experience for neurodiverse students. We're very committed to helping students build connections to RIT. And we don't just look at academics, we look at academic success, social success, career success. You know, it's a very well-rounded approach. Another really important part of what we do is to create a culture of acceptance. And we do collaboration, consulting, training, what we're doing here today. So, all right, I just had to move all the faces. So we focus on some different areas of support. Wellness and self-care, self-advocacy is a big one. And a lot of that is how students work with their supports on campus, faculty, different support offices on campus. Social connections, academic planning, and career preparation. Especially after the first year, we have a strong focus on career and co-op preparation. Sometimes students faculty and staff like to ask what the difference between the Disability Services Office and the Spectrum Support Program. We are both part of Student Affairs, but we're actually in different kind of divisions of Student Affairs. And so even though we don't work under the same leadership and we don't work together per se, we do partner together very closely. They're one of our closest partners. So some of the differences are the Disability Services Office, all the accommodations, extended time on exams, the testing center, note-taking assistance, housing accommodations, ability to use a laptop or different devices and learning, things like that. What we do is our primary role is providing one-on-one coaching with students. Actually, students, it is a fee-based program, so students have to apply actually and to get support, and we have to cap our enrollment because of staffing and space issues. So we have about 100 students a year, about 25 to 30 first-year students, and about 100 students total a year. We also have small group seminars focused around co-op and career. We do case management. So, for example, I have a small group of students that I directly coach, but I actually supervise grad students, and I am the case manager for their students, for example. So we do faculty and staff training, consultation, social events, career transition support, a lot of referrals. So obviously, I'm not an expert in math, or I don't have an expertise in I'm not a psychologist, things like that. So we do a lot of referrals to those offices on campus. And then we have a pre-orientation program. Students come about a day or so before, so we can do some specialized orientation as well. And about 50% of students who are registered with DSO that identify as being on the autism spectrum work with the Spectrum Support Program. So there's no requirement. And some students don't want or need our support. But we do provide, we are available to any student for walk-in. It just isn't the same level of support. So if a student, we always have a few students that maybe drop in a couple times over the semester, just, they need help with like a targeted issue. We have a couple grad students. We don't support grad students per se, but we have a couple of grad students that we see a couple times a semester that need support around something specific. So we do that as well. Just to give you like a perspective of numbers, we are seeing more and more students in college who identify as being neurodivergent. And so I put this slide up there because for 2004, or our incoming students for this coming fall, 1 in 69 students is the approximate number will identify as being neurodivergent. As you can see, the numbers are going up, right, over the years. So, and some of that is because of early interventions, more awareness, more acceptance, more support services in colleges. So the numbers are definitely going up, over the years. So as you can see, in another 6 years, goes from 1 in 69 to 1 in 44. So our work is very, very important. So at RIT, we're very proud of this number. I used the last time we were pre-COVID, when we actually had like real grades for all students. So 90% of our enrolled students were in good academic standing, and many at a much higher level than just above a 2.0. And actually our numbers are as high, but usually higher than the RIT college students. So you hear the word neurodiversity a lot these days. We use it a lot more. And it's really about thinking about, is it just a very natural and form of diversity? It's valuable, it's natural. It's a way of thinking and of differently. It's looking at any variation, different human variation. It includes things like ADHD, Autism Spectrum Disorders, Tourette's. Autism's been around forever. It's always existed. It's a very normal part of our world. And so really raising that awareness and the way that people interact differently is really important. So even we have students that don't have a formal diagnosis, but it also is really part of identity. It is, we have some students that really, it's like identity first versus person first. So that I'm an autistic person versus a person with autism. So the way people identify can be different. So just to talk about some common strengths, so the important thing to say is that there's so much variation and there's so much difference. So it's important not to generalize, but we do sometimes see some common strengths or some common challenges. Problem solving and attention to detail, passionate commitment to ideas, and a strong pursuit of knowledge, a lot of creative out of the box thinking, which I'm sure in your college that you see a lot of, a strong sense of equality and justice, excellent visual spatial reasoning, and total honesty. When I say total honesty, I don't mean like that people don't have the ability to lie, but sometimes there can be a lack of filter, right? And that can be sometimes a challenge in the classroom. So it's a strength because you can always count on, there are some folks you can count on to give it to you like it is. You want an opinion, you get it, but it also can sometimes be a challenge. So, so some of the common challenges, some folks have trouble modulating voice or coordinating body. There's can be some sensitivity to lights, sounds, change, some difficulty with change. Some folks may not understand or follow social expectations or guess body language or facial expressions, and it really is a guess. You know, and a lot of that is cultural as well. May understand or misuse other folks' humor, and there can be a lot more literal thinking. Sometimes irony or sarcasm, exaggeration, it can be hard to understand. So, I think it's important to remember that the difficulty understanding social expectations and like a social code can be a hard thing for lots of folks. So subtle social behaviors are usually expected, but it may not be discussed, but there's a lot of consequences. And I think especially in group work, where you may see it, you really see the impact in student groups and things like that. So I did want to just tell you a quick little snippet about our neurodiverse hiring initiative. We have a partnership with Career Services that we work with employers that are seeking neurodiverse job seekers, and increases career readiness, expands the employment options rather, and preparing employers to effectively engage with neurodiverse job seekers as well. So I have like a few little important to remember and strategies. And then I came up with some questions based on, I've done a couple more for different colleges recently or majors. And then Sharon threw me a few questions as well, but I want to make sure that I leave plenty of time for all of you to ask questions as well. So, important things to remember. Each student has very different needs. It's super important not to generalize. And the needs can vary depending on the situation. So may have very few needs in a classroom, but may have a lot of needs in the workplace or in a social situation, things like that. You know, every person's different. Some people have mental health struggles, physical health struggles. I think especially during COVID, we've seen a lot of just all of our students have struggled with some things. I work with quite a few students who need a long time to process and may respond very, very slowly. So it can feel like a long time to wait 10 seconds or 12 seconds. That can feel like, it feels like 30 minutes, you know, when you're waiting to talk to someone. Oh, I see that I'm frozen. Am I frozen? Can you still hear me, Sharon?
We can still hear you, but you
okay,
are
perfect.
You're
okay,
back.
Yep.
You're
Okay,
back.
good. I'm on campus too, so that should not be happening. So that's one of the things that as a faculty member, you know, allowing a student the time to reflect and to think and to process at the speed that they need to is very important. So because if not, it may shut some folks down. You know, if they need an extra 10 seconds to process and to respond, or sometimes 20. I mean, every person is different. So that's something that I know I've learned over the years, that, you know, those moments of silence are very, very important. Lack of eye contact does not indicate lack of interest. Things like fidgeting, things like doodling, like all of those things can be very helpful in learning. And so it's important not to like necessarily judge someone's that kind of behavior. It's more, you know, what's the work that they're putting out and how are they responding when they're in the discussion boards and things like that. Not every student is going to share if they're autistic. There's still a lot of stigma. So students have the right to that privacy. So they don't share. We don't share with you without that permission, and there's no need to prove it. I recently had a student share that when she discloses, she feels like she's infantilized. So that she's had faculty infantilize her. And so I think no one would do that on purpose, but just being very cognizant of our behavior not changing in a negative way, right? So some strategies, provide direct feedback and set clear boundaries. Direct is really valued. I will say, like, straightforward, direct, no beating around the bush, those kinds of things. Allowing breaks in class, especially, and I know you all have some very long classes. So building in those breaks for all students is probably really appreciated. But for students that maybe get overstimulated, and that can be extremely valuable. Allowing a laptop for note-taking, if that's relevant. Avoid cold calling if, and I think sometimes you'll see that if something's really hard on a student early on, finding a different way to include them if that creates a great deal of stress. So, the lack of sarcasm can be very helpful as well. Consider assigning group roles, providing visual tools when possible, supplementing oral instructions with written instructions. I do a lot of follow-up in writing, just because it really does reiterate your message. And then utilizing the syllabus and note changes as soon as possible. So that all seems kind of obvious, but it really does. Some students say when things are not in writing, when it's just told in class, especially if they process slowly and they have trouble getting all the information down, not having it somewhere else in writing can just, they miss a lot. They may miss a lot. So, okay, I wanted to take a pause. I have a bunch of questions just in case people don't have questions, but I'd love to take a pause now and see if anyone has questions that they might want to jump in with.
Natalie, there is one in the chat if you want to take a look at it from Lauren.
Okie dokie. Hi, Lauren. Yeah, so Lauren asked if those who do not identify as neurodiverse continue to use person first language. It seems like the current thought in that is changing from what I've seen and read recently. Agreed, Lauren. I go back and forth, to be honest with you, because I hear it's different from so many different people. I think, again, it's a preference thing for each individual. That's a really great question, and I don't have a definitive answer to it. I should probably do a little more investigating on that.
That's okay. I was just curious, and actually, I was watching this show what is it? Love on the Spectrum on Netflix, and I somehow stumbled on a YouTube video where it was an autistic person reviewing it, and she was pointing out the fact that the filmmakers always said so-and-so has autism or a person with autism, but all of the people were saying I am autistic, and so this person who was reviewing it was pointing it out, and I've seen it other places too. So yeah, I was curious. It seems like it's changing recently.
It is changing, but there's definitely not a one size fits all. So I think for me, it's respecting what an individual wants to, the language that they want to use. And I do feel like, half the time I say like, neurodivergent, or I'm going back and forth, right? So
yeah,
and they don't all mean the same thing, but sometimes we use them the same. So
yeah, that's fine. I was just curious if there was a thought about it, but it seems like it's just changing and we'll have to keep up.
Yeah, I just saw someone had a hand, but now it's gone.
Sarah had her hand up.
Okay. Hey, Sarah.
Hi. So I have a question that's more about classroom management and about other students' responses to a student who might be on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And the example that I'll use is just something that happened in class a couple of days ago,
Okay.
where I have a student who I don't know is on the spectrum, but I suspect is on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started class, he was on the phone. And I asked him to be quiet, and he stopped, and I started with the lecture, and then he was on the phone again.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him
talking on the phone, or talking on the phone, or playing on the phone?
Talking on the phone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, talking on the phone, like full voice, so I could
Mhm.
hear him. That was my issue.
Mhm.
And so I asked him again to be quiet, and he stopped for a moment, and then he started again. And something kind of clicked for me, and I realized he needs me to tell him that he needs to step out of class if he's going to be on the phone. I think it was maybe a situation where like the phone call was important and then class was important, and maybe he just couldn't like quickly make a decision between what to do.
Was having trouble prioritizing, right?
Yeah. So I just told him then, if you need to be on the phone, you need to step outside the classroom. And he did, and it was fine. But the thing is that in the course of this, you know, you start to get other students who are agitated or who are looking at him or shushing him, that kind of thing. And although this is a specific example, I've kind of had something like that happen before, where maybe a student might be raising their hand a lot or have a hard time holding back answers, and they interject, and other students are annoyed that so-and-so is dominating the conversation. What are some ways that you can maybe redirect student interest or just encourage students to maybe be more respectful without pointing out, like, you need to be nice to so-and-so, but instead just kind of creating an atmosphere where people are more understanding?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's two things to think about. The first is, and if anyone else has other suggestions, please jump in, the things that you've done, because I learn from other people every single day. So, well, there's two things. So I think we've all had students in our classes, or, you know, that we've worked with who are kind of oversharers or over participators. And so I do think that, you know, while still encouraging their participation, also it's an important thing, because when folks go out into the workplace, you know, you need to be able to give other people a chance to share. And so it is really important to kind of learn that balance of participating and listening, right? So, so I have had students that, you know, like I've had a student in the past, many students, but I've had one student in the past who said, yeah, this is something I always have trouble with, you know, once I spoke to him about it. And he said, you know what, you know, in the past, I've had like a signal with my teacher. So like, if they did, you know, like, I don't know, this or something, like that would say to me, like, you know, give someone else, like they would just go like, well, give someone else a chance to talk or whatever. And then that was like a visual signal. So sometimes something like that can help. That can be very helpful. Because the thing is that most people don't want to feel, you know, like their classmates don't want to hear from them, right? So, I mean, that's kind of universal. We want to feel like what we're saying is valued. And when a student starts to share too much, right, that then it's hard to value and hear what they have to say, especially if you were interrupted. So that's just like one thing that I've worked with a couple of students, just kind of coming up with their own signal. And if that's what you feel is the case, if you feel like it is both how people can value, you know, but also if other students are being interrupted, you know, giving them the language to say like, oh, you know, Joe, can you just give me 1 second? You know, I wanted to make my point first or whatever. And usually people are very, my experience is students are very open to hearing that and getting that feedback. Are you finding that, it was Sarah, right? Are you finding that students are pretty patient or impatient? Sarah? Oh, I lost her. Okay. So any other?
Sorry,
Yes.
I got disconnected.
Okay, there it is. All right. Do you find that students are generally pretty patient? Oh, is she still disconnected? I don't want to. You can jump back in when you get reconnected. What other kinds of questions do people have?
There's one in the chat, Natalie, from Christy.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I've got so much up in front of my tiny little screen. Okay, let's see. Similar to Sarah, in the instance where a student may need to stim in class, whether with an accommodation or not, other students may respond or bring it up as a distraction. how to manage that issue without singling anyone out or disclosing personal information. Yeah, I think it also depends on how distracting it is. So, sometimes if it's something that is so incredibly distracting, it takes everyone away from class. Sometimes maybe taking a step outside the class can be helpful. But I think in general, if a student, most of you have smaller classes. So, and these students probably are together a lot if they're in the same major. So I do think, if a student wants to share with his or her peers, with their peers, that's something I need to do to, get out my stress or whatever the case may, however they want to explain it. That can be helpful. I do think sometimes like other students have to learn how to deal with something that's a little bit distracting as well. So, you could ask the student themselves if they want to share or how they might want to explain if there's a concern. But yeah, I mean, it is one of those things that you're not going to just share on their behalf, obviously, for privacy's sake. But I think like Sarah said before, this was not one of my students, but someone that a colleague worked with. A student had a bunch of accommodations, and it was like being able to pace or, it was a bunch of different things, and did it inside the classroom, but it was really meant to be like leave the classroom and do it, because some of it was a little bit on the loud side. So in that case, the student just need to be told, like, you can't just do it in the back of the class, you have to go into the hallway, so sometimes if it's not really clear, just providing that clarity with the student that may need to do that, or with someone else if it's a matter of just kind of learning to live with something that's a little bit distracting. I don't see any more questions right now. So there we go. Some of the questions that actually some faculty from a different department through me were approaching a student to ask how to best communicate with them. And it was a pretty open question. So obviously it'll depend on the situation. But we already talked about putting things in writing, discussing your preferred methods of communication, and then talking to students early on in the semester and privately. So I think that can be really, really important. Okay, so Bruce had a question. As a faculty member, is there a way for me to know which of your students are neurodiverse, or is it up to them to let the teacher know for privacy issues? Yeah, so it's up to each individual student to disclose. So yeah, it's up to them if they want to disclose, and that isn't something that will be shared by anybody besides the student, unless they ask us to talk with a faculty member, we do sit in and talk with faculty frequently with a student if they want us to, but that's up to them. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was a great question. And then Sarah responded. And then John, I have a student who gets upset if I spend more time with other students. How do I give fair time to everyone and still meet their needs? I would talk to that student directly, have a private, ask them to come to office hours or something, and just talk about, equal does not mean fair always, right? So sometimes you need to spend more time with some students than other students because their needs are greater. And it's still being fair because everyone's getting their needs met, right? So I would have a conversation if that student is really struggling, and I'm not sure if it's a student that has disclosed that they're on the spectrum or someone else that's frustrated with you spending time with another student that has more needs. So yeah, I would just speak to them specifically, and if they aren't getting their needs met in class, that's what office hours are for, right? So, Jen, does that answer your question? Okay. All right. All right, I don't see any more questions in the chat. We still have a little bit of time. My computer's really slow. Sorry. So this was a question from a different department, but also has a lot of projects. So I thought this would be relevant to you all in your, because you have so much project work. They asked, how do they support students when they're required to do open-ended requirements? Having the clear deadlines is really helpful. And I was speaking to some faculty the other day that, you know, being flexible is really wonderful with students, but sometimes can be, it's like a blessing and a curse, you know, when deadlines are too flexible or policies are too flexible, it can also not provide the structure that students need. So, you know, really having clear deadlines, keeping them in my courses and the syllabus. For large projects, it's helpful. I've worked in various different areas of student support, and I would say most students really it helps to have, you know, portions of the project due along the way, which I think most CAD faculty do from what I've seen. So there's the Academic Success Center is really helpful for any student, not just our students. So, and then providing visual examples can be really helpful. Some previous work, a layout, you know, that can help students conceptualize assignments better. So, so talking about de-escalating situations, which I know can be a concern. Obviously speak to the student privately and really directly as well. So really letting the student know how sometimes the perspective taking for neurodivergent students can be a bit of a challenge. So students may not always know how what they're doing in the classroom is impacting other students in the classroom, or you as the faculty member or their advisor, whomever. So really asking to speak to the student privately and being very direct. And, you know, when you call out, you know, so much, you know, it's distracting to other students, or, you know, it interrupts the flow of the lecture or something like that. You know, and so and then offering some positive other ways to handle it. Encouraging students to take breaks, go for a walk, you know, leave the room for 5 minutes if they need to. And I already talked about this, coming up with a signal if needed. So what does a faculty member say if they suspect a student might be on the spectrum and struggling? Offer support, address behavior concerns. It really doesn't matter if they're neurodivergent. You know, it really is less important if someone has like a diagnosis. It's more important just supporting them as a student. If there's concerns or behaviors in your class that are creating concerns for that student or for other students, addressing the behaviors, addressing the concerns versus addressing, you know, a diagnosis. So, so that would just be my suggestion, because you may never know if they don't share. And we have folks reach out to us all the time about one of our students that actually isn't a student that we work with. So they may not be on the spectrum, or they may be on the spectrum and not work with us. So we're always here to offer support. I meet with faculty I just met with an adjunct faculty recently that just had some concerns about a student in their classroom and asked if they could talk and bounce some things off me. And so we had a nice chat, and it didn't happen to be a student that I knew, but, you know, it helped kind of him think about some ways to talk to the student and approach a situation. So you can always contact us anytime. For support, for questions, for consulting about a student or just about a situation. So please don't be afraid. We have a general email line or email address that's easy to remember, ssp@RIT, but all of us are on the website. So if you wanted to reach out to anyone specifically, there's a whole bunch of us. So, and that's about it. And then, Sarah, I'm going to turn off this so I can actually better see who's raising their hand and everything. It looked like Bruce had a hand up. Unless that was an old hand. Sarah had a hand up. Now I can see hands, so I don't know if those are old hands or new hands.
I was clapping.
Oh, that was a clap. Thank you. Right.
I actually had a question that's a really practical one.
Yes.
If a student comes to me and they don't currently have a DSO or a diagnosis, but they themselves suspect that they might be neurodivergent, not necessarily even on the spectrum, but maybe they think that they probably have ADHD. Where can I send them, or what can I tell them about help and resources on campus? And is there a cost associated with this kind of diagnosis? In these cases, it hasn't happened often, but when it's happened, sometimes the student has also mentioned that they're not getting support from family at home, that their family is not supportive of this idea that the child might be neurodivergent.
Okay, that's such a great question. Well, first of all, our disability services office is fantastic. So they are really supportive of just helping students figure out what they need. You know, they treat it, it's very different than, you know, kind of growing up and you know, having like a 504 or something in high school. You know, a student's experience is a very valuable part of the kind of evaluation of whether accommodations are needed. So my first suggestion would be that they make an appointment and speak to someone in disability services who can help them figure out kind of maybe what they need to be successful here at RIT. If there's accommodations that might help them. And I think they'll tell you that I just heard her present on some numbers, but there was a lot of the accommodations are around mental health. A lot of the accommodations are around ADHD, you know, deaf and hard of hearing, autism spectrum. You know, there's a physical disability. Like there's such a huge and wide variety. So if you have a student that is sharing with you, well, first of all, that's fantastic. It shows that you know, your classroom is a very safe, comfortable place. So, but the other thing is if they really feel like they might benefit from the support of the Spectrum Support Program, anyone can come see us anytime. So they can make an appointment, they can drop in. We're here 5 days a week. So we are always happy to talk to students, and there is a fee. We are fee-based, but if someone gets, you know, weekly or twice weekly coaching, but it doesn't cost any student anything to come talk to somebody and to come see us once in a while. And we have social stuff that lots of students, our neurodiverse hiring initiative is open to every student on campus. So yeah, I would definitely encourage you to send them our way if that's relevant, or towards the DSO. Yep, and Sharon's adding everything to the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's it in the chat. Yeah, I guess one of my biggest messages is don't be afraid to reach out if you feel like you want support and best supporting a student or a situation or your classroom. That's what we're here for.
Natalie, I was just going to add that there are a couple different situations that we're currently working through right now with individual students. And I think the collaboration has been great. I think if there's a student that you have concern about, I would say, if you're not the program director, reach out to your program director. We're having some collaborative conversation about a couple students with program director and school director and myself, and in several cases, you or someone from the Spectrum Support Program. You know, we've had a situation where we needed to ask a student to leave the classroom, and per the attendance policy in the policy library, a faculty member can do that for one class period. But really anything beyond that needs to be in consultation with your academic department leadership. And in those situations, we did have some collaborative conversation around how to work with this student and the situation and come up with an alternate way to deliver the course material or for them to achieve the course objectives and still be respectful of the students that were being disrupted by the behavior. So I think there's been a lot of good ways that different faculty and department leadership and resources have come together to really work through some of these complex situations.
Yeah, I mean, I've found the folks that I've worked with to be great partners in collaboration for our students over the years. So I value those relationships a great deal. And I think students also appreciate when, when they're struggling, they have us for support and they have you for support, right? So when we can work together to best support them, I think it helps the most, so.
Are there any final questions for Natalie?
Thank you, Nate.
Thank you, Natalie. We really appreciate your time and for allowing us to record this and put this on our website for those that were not able to join us live. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you for having me anytime. All right.
Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great weekend. Okay, bye.